Fletcher-class radar. How Japan lost its night advantage. Introduction. Mastering the darkness. This article delves into an era when the night belonged to the Imperial Japanese Navy. It is a story of how a single technology turned the tide of the war in the Pacific, stripping one of the most formidable naval powers of its primary tactical advantage. Section 1. Samurai of the Night. Origins of Japanese dominance. This section explores how and why the Imperial Japanese Navy embraced night combat, transforming it into a high art. We will explore the doctrine, training, and weaponry that made them invincible in the darkness. During the 1920s and 1930s, the Japanese dedicated significant resources to perfecting night operations. A cornerstone of their strategy was the development and adoption of the Type 93 long-lance, oxygen-propelled torpedo. This formidable weapon, with a range of up to 40 kilometers, boasted a reach 2 to 3 times greater than that of contemporary American torpedoes, providing a decisive edge in engagements. Beyond weaponry, Japanese destroyers and cruisers were equipped with unique night binoculars, offering an impressive magnification of up to 12x. This superior optics, combined with extensive training, allowed Japanese crews to spot and engage enemy vessels long before they themselves were detected. The effectiveness of this doctrine was brutally demonstrated on August 9, 1942, at the Battle of Surigao Island. In a crushing display of Japanese night combat superiority, an Allied naval force suffered a devastating defeat, primarily due to the precision and lethality of Japanese torpedo attacks executed under the cover of darkness. A lesser-known fact highlighting the intensity of their preparation is that Japanese captains underwent rigorous night attack training in the Bungo Strait. These exercises were designed to replicate combat conditions as closely as possible, pushing crews to master complex maneuvers at high speeds in absolute darkness. For Japan, night combat was more than just a tactic, it was a philosophy. It represented a strategic approach to equalize the odds against a potentially more powerful adversary, such as the United States, through courage, speed, and unparalleled skill. Imagine the inky black waters of the Solomon Islands. Only a faint starlight pierces the sky. From the gloom, without a single searchlight beam, a pack of Japanese destroyers emerges. Minutes before the enemy even suspects their presence, the deadly long-lance torpedoes hiss from their tubes. Night, their friend and ally, remains silent. Section 2. The All-Seeing Eye, the birth of the Fletcher and its radar fist. Here, we shift our focus to the United States, where the answer to the Japanese night threat was being forged, the Fletcher-class destroyer. The emphasis is on its technological heart, the radar complex that transformed night from a sanctuary into a transparent battlefield. The early years of the 1940s marked a pivotal period in naval warfare, as the United States grappled with the undeniable superiority of the Imperial Japanese Navy in nocturnal engagements. The devastating losses at Surigao Island and other early night battles underscored the urgent need for a technological countermeasure. The solution emerged not merely as a new ship, but as a sophisticated platform for advanced sensory and fire control systems. The Fletcher-class destroyer, armed with a revolutionary radar complex. Between 1941 and 1942, American ingenuity was channeled into the rapid development and widespread deployment of fire control radars such as the Mk.4 and the even more advanced Mk.12/22. These systems represented a monumental leap from earlier, more basic radar capabilities. Prior to this, radar was primarily used for air and surface search, offering basic detection and range information. However, the new fire control radars were designed with a much more precise purpose: to accurately track targets and feed continuous, real-time data to a ship's gun directors, enabling remarkably accurate gunfire even in conditions of zero visibility. Starting in 1942, the Fletcher-class destroyers began to enter service, immediately integrating these cutting-edge radar systems into their operational doctrine. A Fletcher was not armed with a single radar. Rather, it was equipped with a comprehensive suite of radar units, each serving a specific, critical function. This layered approach provided unparalleled situational awareness. At the core of this complex were the search radars, such as the SK and SG models. These radars, with their broader beams and longer ranges, were responsible for initial detection of surface contacts and air threats, providing early warning and general bearing and distance information. They painted a broad picture of the surrounding maritime environment, allowing the Fletcher to detect enemy formations well beyond visual range, often before the Japanese even knew they were being observed. However, the true game-changer and what truly distinguished the Fletcher was its fire control radar. Unlike the search radars, these systems possessed a much narrower, more focused beam, capable of locking onto a specific target. Once a target was acquired by the search radar, the fire control radar would take over, providing continuous, highly accurate data on the target's range, bearing, course, and speed. This information was instantly transmitted to the ship's main battery gun directors. This meant that the Fletcher could open fire with its 5-inch guns with lethal accuracy, even if the target was completely invisible to the human eye due to darkness, fog, or adverse weather. The radar effectively eliminated the traditional advantage of night, transforming it from a cloak of invisibility into a transparent medium for American gunners. Among American sailors, the capabilities of these new radars quickly became legendary, often exaggerated with a touch of humor and pride. A popular jest circulating among the crews highlighted this newfound confidence. Our radar can spot a beer can floating a mile away and tell if it's Pepsi or Coca-Cola. While obviously an overstatement, it perfectly captured the profound impact of this technology on morale and operational confidence. It underscored the feeling that the Fletcher was equipped with an almost clairvoyant ability to perceive the enemy in the darkest conditions. The Fletcher-class destroyer, therefore, was far more than just a naval vessel. It was a sophisticated platform for advanced technology. The underlying interpretation of this development was clear. The United States was not simply fighting a war of attrition or outproducing its enemies in sheer numbers of shells. Instead, it was winning the war with megahertz, the frequency of its radar waves. This technological superiority fundamentally altered the calculus of naval combat. Admiral Arleigh Burke, a legendary destroyer commander who would later become Chief of Naval Operations, eloquently articulated the transformative power of radar. He famously stated, "Radar gave us the ability to operate with a certainty that had previously been impossible. Night was no longer our enemy." This quote encapsulates the profound shift in naval strategy and psychological advantage that radar bestowed upon the American fleet. It liberated American commanders from the anxieties and limitations of visual combat, allowing them to engage with unprecedented confidence and precision under any conditions. Picture the greenish gloom of the Fletcher's radar room. On the radar screen, resembling a cyclops's eye, luminous points flicker and trace across the display. Contact, bearing 245, range 18,000 yards. A calm, even voice reports from the operator. For the captain, the dark, turbulent sea outside the porthole suddenly gains form and definition. Out there, in the impenetrable darkness, an enemy formation is advancing, revealed by the all-seeing eye of the radar. The night, once a Japanese ally, had now become a silent informer for the Americans. Section 3. The First Call. The night at Lunga Point, November 1942. This is the story of the first serious engagement where radar began to change the rules of the game. While not yet involving Fletcher-class destroyers, their future tactics were already being tested in battle. This pivotal encounter illuminated the potential of radar to neutralize the Imperial Japanese Navy's long-standing dominance in night combat and heralded a new era of naval warfare in the Pacific. The date was November 13th, 1942, and the setting was the treacherous waters off Guadalcanal. This was a critical juncture in the Solomon Islands campaign, a brutal struggle for control of the strategic airbase on Guadalcanal. The Imperial Japanese Navy was attempting to reinforce their beleaguered troops on the island, while the U.S. Navy was determined to interdict these Tokyo Express resupply missions. The ensuing engagement was one of the most chaotic and intense naval battles of the war, a maelstrom of close-quarters combat fought in the pitch black of night. In this ferocious night battle, American battleships, notably the USS Washington and the USS South Dakota, played a crucial role. Critically, these battleships were equipped with early but effective radar systems. These radars, while perhaps not as refined as those that would later grace the Fletcher-class destroyers, were nonetheless capable of detecting and tracking Japanese ships in the complete darkness. This capability allowed the American vessels to engage the enemy with a precision that was previously unimaginable in a night engagement. The USS Washington, in particular, delivered one of the most accurate radar-guided night bombardments of the war. In a dramatic turn of events, it engaged the Japanese battleship Kirishima. While Japanese ships were relying on visual spotting, their highly trained lookouts, and their formidable Type 93 torpedoes, the Washington methodically tracked its target using its radar. The American battleship then unleashed a devastating barrage of shells, guided by the unseen eyes of its electronic sensors. The result was catastrophic for the Kirishima, which suffered heavy damage and was ultimately sunk. This encounter proved beyond doubt that radar could transform night combat from a realm of visual guesswork and close-range brawling into a domain of calculated, long-range strikes. A little-known fact from this battle underscores the profound shock and disorientation experienced by the Japanese command. Admiral Nobutake Kondo, who was commanding the Japanese forces in that engagement, was utterly bewildered by the American capability. In his post-battle report, a mixture of disbelief and awe, he stated that he had encountered 2 new battleships equipped with night vision devices of incredible effectiveness. Kondo's assessment, though misidentifying the technology, perfectly captured the overwhelming advantage radar had conferred upon the Americans. He could not comprehend how the Americans were able to strike with such accuracy in the darkness, attributing it to a mystical night vision rather than the then-secret electronic marvel of radar. The Battle of November 13, 1942, off Guadalcanal, represented a significant psychological turning point in the Pacific War. For the Japanese, it was a chilling realization that their cherished element, the night, had seemingly betrayed them. Their long-held tactical advantage, built on decades of doctrine, training, and specialized equipment, was suddenly and inexplicably undermined. The confidence they had cultivated in their samurai of the night doctrine was severely shaken. The night, once their most trusted ally, had revealed their positions and allowed their enemy to strike with impunity. Conversely, for the Americans, this battle was a profound revelation. It confirmed their burgeoning belief that they had found the key to unlocking the secrets of night combat. The success of the Washington's radar-guided gunnery demonstrated that technology could overcome the traditional limitations of darkness. It validated the immense investment in radar research and development and provided a clear path forward for future naval engagements. The potential for systematic night dominance, previously held by the Japanese, was now within American grasp. An anecdote, rooted in the very real confusion and awe among the Japanese, perfectly illustrates this technological chasm. It was rumored among Japanese sailors after this battle that they began to suspect the Americans had made a pact with the spirits of the island, who were showing them the way. The technology was so far beyond their comprehension, so seemingly impossible, that it was explained through mysticism. The idea that invisible waves could pierce the darkness and reveal their every move was simply too advanced for many to grasp, leading to superstitious explanations for what was, in reality, a groundbreaking technological advantage. The night at Lunga Point, while not solely a Fletcher triumph, was a crucial precursor. It demonstrated the efficacy of radar-guided fire control and laid the groundwork for the tactics that Fletcher-class destroyers, with their even more advanced radar suites, would later perfect. It was the first stark indication that the era of Japanese night supremacy was drawing to a close, replaced by the all-seeing electronic eyes of the American fleet. Section 4. The Fletchers enter the game. The hunt begins, 1943 to 1944. The mass arrival of Fletcher-class destroyers signaled the end of the era of Japanese night dominance. This section illustrates how these destroyers became the vanguard of the new American fleet, actively hunting and neutralizing the samurai of the night. The lessons learned from earlier engagements, coupled with the advanced capabilities of the Fletcher class, transformed the tactical landscape of the Pacific. Following the pivotal and often brutal engagements of late 1942, particularly the battles around Guadalcanal where radar had shown its nascent potential, the U.S. Navy began to fully integrate its technological advantages into its frontline forces. The Fletcher-class destroyers, with their superior speed, formidable armament of 5 5-inch guns, and, most critically, their sophisticated radar suites, became the perfect instruments for this new kind of warfare. By 1943, these destroyers were entering service in significant numbers, fundamentally altering the balance of power in the crucial night battles that continued to rage across the Pacific. The Fletchers were not merely faster or more heavily armed than their predecessors. They were designed from the keel up as platforms for advanced electronic warfare. Each Fletcher was equipped with a comprehensive set of radars, including both air/surface search radars, SK/SG, and, crucially, fire control radars, MK.12/22. This combination allowed them to detect, track, and engage enemy ships with remarkable precision, regardless of visibility. The synergistic effect of these systems meant that the Fletcher destroyers could operate with a level of confidence and lethality in the dark that was unprecedented. Classic examples of the Fletcher's impact are numerous from 1943 onwards. The Battle of Empress Augusta Bay in November 1943 and the Battle of Cape St. George later the same month stand out as prime instances where radar-guided destroyers effectively neutralized Japanese night tactics. In these engagements, American destroyer squadrons, often spearheaded by Fletchers, utilized their radar advantage to intercept and annihilate Japanese night convoys and destroyer formations. The tactics employed by the Fletchers were highly effective and versatile. They were frequently deployed as advanced pickets, scouting ahead of larger formations. In this role, they acted as the eyes of the fleet, detecting Japanese movements long before visual contact was possible and relaying crucial targeting information back to battleships and cruisers. This allowed the larger ships to prepare for engagement and even open fire from extreme ranges, often while the Japanese were still struggling to visually acquire their targets. Moreover, the Fletchers were also deployed as independent strike groups, capable of conducting devastating night attacks on their own. Their speed allowed them to quickly maneuver into advantageous positions, while their radar-guided gunnery and torpedoes enabled them to launch accurate strikes without needing to rely on visual identification or flares, which would betray their own positions. They could swiftly close the distance, deliver a crippling blow, and then disappear back into the darkness, leaving the Japanese in confusion and disarray. From the Japanese perspective, the emergence of these radar-equipped American destroyers fostered a growing sense of unease and even superstition. Rumors began to circulate among Japanese crews about invisible rays emanating from American ships that hypnotized their gunners, preventing them from taking accurate aim. This desperate attempt to rationalize their sudden and inexplicable vulnerability in night combat spoke volumes about the technological gap that had opened up. The reality, of course, was far more prosaic. American radar allowed them to achieve a first strike capability and consistently land hits on Japanese vessels long before the Japanese could visually acquire and range their targets. The ability to open fire first and accurately bracket the enemy before they could even understand the nature of the threat was a game-changer. The interpretation of this period is clear. The tactical paradigm had shifted decisively. The shoot, hit, and vanish tactic, once the hallmark of the Japanese night fighters, had been appropriated and perfected by the Fletchers. Where Japanese destroyers once used the night to launch surprise torpedo attacks and disengage before being detected, American Fletchers now turned the tables. They used their radars to achieve surprise, delivered devastating salvos of gunfire and torpedoes, and then, often under the cover of continued darkness, withdraw or press their advantage against a reeling enemy. The consistent string of American victories in night engagements throughout 1943 and 1944, driven by the capabilities of the Fletcher-class and its radar, irrevocably broke the Japanese hold on nocturnal combat. The samurai of the night found themselves increasingly blinded and outmaneuvered in an environment where they once reigned supreme. The hunt had begun, and the Fletchers were leading the charge, methodically dismantling Japan's tactical advantage one radar contact at a time. Section 5. The Apex of Blindness. The rout in Surigao Strait, October 1944. This battle stands as the ultimate triumph of American radar tactics and the final act in the drama of the Japanese night fleet. It was a 20th-century execution of the classic crossing the T maneuver, demonstrating beyond any doubt the decisive impact of technological superiority in naval warfare. By October 1944, the tide of the Pacific War had turned dramatically against Japan. The U.S. forces were advancing relentlessly, pushing toward the Japanese home islands. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, a colossal naval engagement, was unfolding, representing one of the largest naval battles in history. Within this grand strategy, a specific, decisive engagement would occur that perfectly encapsulated the theme of this article. The Battle of Surigao Strait, fought on October 25, 1944. The Japanese Imperial Navy, in a desperate attempt to disrupt the American invasion of Leyte, launched a complex four-pronged attack. One of these forces, Force C, commanded by Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura, was tasked with entering the Surigao Strait from the south and attacking the Allied amphibious forces in Leyte Gulf. Nishimura's force comprised 2 old battleships, Yamashiro, flagship, and Fuso, a heavy cruiser Mogami, and 4 destroyers. This force, while determined, was sailing into a meticulously prepared American trap. The American 7th Fleet, under the command of Vice Admiral Jesse B. Oldendorf, anticipated Nishimura's approach and positioned its forces to create an ideal ambush within the narrow confines of Surigao Strait. Oldendorf's strategy was a classic crossing the T maneuver, a naval tactic where a line of ships crosses the T of an approaching enemy column, allowing all ships in the crossing line to bring their full broadsides to bear, while the enemy can only reply with its forward guns. This tactical formation was devastating in an era of visual combat. With radar, it became absolutely overwhelming. Oldendorf's blocking force consisted of a formidable array of battleships, including those famously salvaged from Pearl Harbor like Maryland, West Virginia, Tennessee, California, and Pennsylvania, cruisers, and a significant number of destroyers. Crucially, among these destroyers were numerous Fletcher-class vessels, brimming with their advanced radar suites. As Nishimura's squadron entered the Surigao Strait in the pre-dawn darkness of October 25th, they were almost completely blind. Their older, less effective radars were either non-existent or incapable of providing reliable targeting information. They were sailing into a dark, confined waterway, relying primarily on visual lookouts and the faint hope of surprising the enemy. However, the American forces were anything but blind. Their radar screens, particularly those on the Fletchers and other advanced ships, vividly depicted the Japanese squadron's precise movements. Each Japanese vessel was a clear, glowing blip on the greenish displays of the American radar rooms. The American fleet had perfectly deployed itself across the strait, forming an impenetrable barrier. Using their sophisticated radars, they detected Nishimura's squadron at long range, tracking its approach with chilling accuracy. The battle unfolded as a systematic, brutal annihilation. The Fletchers and other destroyers initiated the attack. Positioned on the flanks of the strait, they launched salvos of radar-guided torpedoes into the approaching Japanese formation. These torpedoes struck with devastating effect, crippling and sinking several Japanese ships, including the battleship Fuso, which broke in half. The Japanese, still largely unaware of the exact location of their attackers, could do little more than return sporadic, ineffective fire into the darkness. Following the torpedo attacks, Oldendorf's battle line of battleships opened fire. Their heavy guns, guided by radar, unleashed a torrent of shells onto the surviving Japanese ships. The sheer volume and accuracy of fire were overwhelming. It was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was an execution. The Japanese ships, silhouetted on American radar screens, became targets in a shooting gallery. They were hit repeatedly, without being able to effectively respond or even pinpoint the source of the devastating fire. A little-known fact that encapsulates the utter disparity was that Japanese ships navigated the strait practically blind, while American radars painted their precise locations on screens. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The psychological impact on the Japanese crews was immense, as they were subjected to relentless fire from an unseen enemy. A chilling quote from a survivor of the Japanese battleship Yamashiro perfectly captures this experience. "We waited for the order to open fire, peering into the darkness, and suddenly, the sea around us boiled with shell splashes. They already saw us, but we could not see them." This statement starkly highlights the complete reversal of fortune in night combat. The samurai of the night were now the ones trapped in impenetrable darkness, while their technologically superior adversaries struck with impunity. Imagine the Surigao Strait as a perfect ambush. Japanese silhouettes, illuminated on radar screens like targets in a shooting range, enter the deadly funnel. From the flanks, Fletchers dart out, launching radar-guided torpedoes. From the main direction, the salvos of battleships thunder. The flashes of gunfire briefly illuminate Nishimura's doomed ships. For Japan, the night in the Pacific had finally ended. The Battle of Surigao Strait was the definitive confirmation that radar, embodied by ships like the Fletcher, had irrevocably extinguished Japan's advantage in nocturnal warfare. Conclusion: when the lights went out. This concluding section draws a stark contrast between the beginning and the end of the war, illustrating how a technological gap led to a tactical catastrophe for Japan. The story of the Fletcher-class radar is not just about a series of battles won, but about the fundamental and irreversible transformation of naval warfare. At the outset of the Pacific War, the Imperial Japanese Navy had cultivated an almost mystical command over night operations. Through decades of dedicated training, specialized optics, and the development of formidable weapons like the Type 93 Long Lance torpedo, they had transformed the darkness into their most potent ally. Battles such as Savo Island stood as grim testaments to their tactical supremacy under the cover of night, leaving Allied forces reeling and commanders perplexed. The Japanese believed they had truly mastered the darkness, using it as a shield and a spear against their adversaries. However, as the war progressed, particularly from late 1942 onwards, the landscape of naval combat underwent a radical and irreversible shift. The introduction and widespread deployment of sophisticated radar technology, epitomized by the Fletcher-class destroyers and integrated into the broader U.S. Navy fleet, systematically dismantled Japan's cherished advantage. The battles discussed in previous sections, From the initial radar-guided strikes at Lunga Point to the devastating rout in Surigao Strait, were not isolated incidents but rather cumulative evidence of a technological revolution that rendered Japan's traditional night tactics obsolete. By the war's end, the stark reality was that even Japanese ships began to be equipped with radars. Yet, these late-war Japanese radar systems were universally inferior in quality, reliability, and precision compared to their American counterparts. More critically, the Japanese fleet simply did not possess the luxury of time or the necessary resources to develop new doctrines, integrate the technology effectively, and, most importantly, train their crews in the complex art of radar-guided combat. The extensive training regimens, the development of sophisticated fire control integration, and the tactical innovations that underpinned American radar dominance simply could not be replicated by a besieged and resource-starved Imperial Japanese Navy. Their attempts to adopt radar were too little, too late, and too undeveloped to make a meaningful difference. The story of the Fletcher-class radar serves as an eternal reminder that in warfare, victory is not solely determined by courage or fighting spirit, but also by intellect, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of technological superiority. Japan's defeat in night combat was not a consequence of its sailors suddenly fighting less bravely or with diminished skill. On the contrary, Japanese sailors continued to exhibit immense courage and tenacity throughout the war. The crucial factor was that the very nature of naval combat had changed fundamentally and irrevocably. The rules of engagement had been rewritten by the invisible waves of radar. The Fletcher and its all-seeing eye did more than just win individual battles. They effectively extinguished the light for the samurai of the night, leaving them stranded in a state of helpless, absolute darkness. The night, once their greatest asset, had become a liability, a transparent medium through which American ships could track, target, and destroy them with impunity. The psychological impact of being hunted by an unseen enemy, of receiving devastating blows from beyond visual range, was profound and demoralizing. In essence, the technological gap, specifically in radar development and integration, created an insurmountable tactical chasm between the two navies. Japan's reliance on traditional visual combat and exceptional individual skill, while impressive, proved insufficient against an adversary armed with technology that pierced the veil of darkness. The Fletcher-class destroyer, as a symbol of American technological prowess, not only revolutionized night naval combat, but also played a pivotal role in securing Allied victory in the Pacific, forever changing the face of warfare at sea. The light of Japan's night dominance had, indeed, gone out.